Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to our second episode or second edition as we discuss about Bitcoin, starting off with the history of money. Previous episode, we discussed about the history of money pre-metallic. So everything that happened before metal got involved, before mankind discovered about how it can melt and reshape and use metal. And we focused on everything before that. And we touched also upon the topic of what is money in the first place. We mentioned that money is essentially a representation of a debt. It's a means to hold something as ransom so you can get what you want later on after you've given that thing of someone else. Um, and the beginnings of money or metallic money, we can understand, or we look at the historically speaking, began because in Egypt, the earliest examples of money being used in Egypt was nuggets of gold or maybe pieces of silver, no specifically nuggets of gold that was used. And what's interesting at this point is that this was pre-coinage. This is before man got the knowledge of melting this down and forming it into a coin. Before that was known, they used pieces of metal, pieces of metal or gold. And we have an example of that actually in the Quran where Yusuf alayhi salam was sold into slavery, and Allah mentioned he was sold for darahim, for thamanu bakhsin, some lowly value, some cheap value, darahim ma'duda. Allah mentioned darahim ma'duda. Now, what's interesting about that use of the word darahim ma'duda, the dirham, the origin of the word dirham, we're going to talk about it a bit later on, but the origin of dirham, it was a coin used in Greece. So the dirham was, sorry, no, I think it's Greece or Rome. The dinars and the dinar, one of them is both Greece and Rome. But this was obviously came after Yusuf. So we understand here that the use of the word darahim ma'duda was as in a few coins, a few pieces of silver. So it was something very cheap. It wasn't actually a dirham. So this was used in the early stages because it was easy to get it, and the way they would exchange is by the weight of it. So how heavy it is, which essentially demonstrates how much of it is. The heavier it is, the more it is, and so on and so forth. Until the Lydians, which was it's a place in, you could say, in Europe. It's kind of it's near Greece, but it's not exactly Greece. But they were the first ones that we know of, that we have historical records of, which shows a coin that has in circular form, that is a stamp or a signature or an emblem on that coin. And they were the first ones. That was 650 BC. So we don't have anything prior to 650 BC of a coin being used. They were the first one we know of that actually used the knowledge of smelting and metallurgy to make coinage. And from that moment on, we find an explosion of coins being used from that moment onwards, from 600 BC. We find the Romans in 54 BC making their own coinage and stamping their own coin and putting their own record in, because of marking that in history. We have in 700 AD, the Marwan ibn Hakam, which is the first example of Muslims coining their own or minting their own coins. And the reason that was given is that this was that the coins that they were using before was foreigners' coins. Not that it's a bad thing, but it was the coins that others were using. But there was the risk of forgery, which we'll discuss a bit later on. So they decided to mint their own coin that they can use in the Islamic society, that they can guarantee what exactly it is. And coins were used throughout history. In India, we find coins in India, ironically enough, with the Shahada and so on and so forth, because Muslims were in charge at the time. We have coins used in Europe, throughout the whole of Europe, including UK. And one interesting type of coin that was used was in China. And why I say it's interesting is because it had a hole in the middle, which was resembling the early forms of money that was that we discussed before, which is shells or glass beads and whatnot, that essentially had a hole in the middle, because that is how they kept. That was the prehistoric or the pre times or the early times of wallets. You put the coin or you put the thing on a string, and you can tie that string on different things. So that was early forms of money, coin money in China. So even they had a hole in the middle, so you can string it into, put the coin into a string and keep money onto a certain string. Until that was the technology at the time. metal formed with heat, minted, and that was used in circulation. Generally speaking, it had the money was made from precious metals, rare metals, and that's something you find consistent through all forms of money. It has to be something that requires effort to make and has a level of scarcity, that something that is rare. And we'll discuss more about this on our website. Until at some point in China, they decided to store these coins in, you could say, a treasury or in a building or whatnot, and issue certificates. And this was the beginnings of what we call paper money. Now, that is not the same. That's not the same. The beginnings of the money we use today. That was the beginning of using certification to represent actual money, or money that had actual value. Now, as we just said earlier on, money is a representation of a debt. That's what it is. So this certificate is still just representing a debt. But you can imagine that for centuries we've been exchanging things for work rendered. That obviously humans, we attach value to these things specifically. And these things have weight, they're heavy. Gold nuggets, silver nuggets, even coins, they're heavy, especially if a lot of it. And especially if you could say that the value of these coins may be debased, maybe you need a lot of these coins to buy simple things. It became easier just to store these things in a central place and get a certificate to represent that. And that's what happened. It began in China. And as you can imagine, most technology, when technology is new, once it begins and it's useful to mankind, it explodes and it spreads. We see after that in China, in Japan, in America, and what European countries, the explosion of certification as a representation of coins stored. And it's important to remember that phrase, a certificate that represents coins or whatever value stored somewhere else. And that was what it was at the time. And the benefits we have of that was that, number one, it was lighter. Obviously, carrying trunks of gold is very heavy, where you can just carry pieces of paper. Also, we have that it's semi-immune to damage, meaning that if I have a certificate and I was to tear it or pierce off, it's still worth the same amount. As long as I can identify it's a real certificate, it's still worth the same amount. And I think even to this day in America, if you tear a dollar in half, as long as you have more than 50% of the dollar available, it's worth the same dollar. If you have less than that, then no. But if you have more than 50% of the dollar that it's worth, then it still has the same value. So it's semi-immune to damage in the sense of value. Easy to replace. I just go to the person who issued the certificate, give them the old one, and they give me a brand new one, and there's no issue at all. Which is not the same for a gold coin, but it's actually a thing. If it's broken off or you've lost it, it's gone. And easy to divide. So I can have a gold nugget here, a gold chunk here, and I can write on this piece of paper that this paper represents 1/1,000,000th of this coin. And I can do that. I can do any number I want on this thing. It's just a representation of what we have in storage. So it was, as a technology, it was great for what it was and at its time. And this continued up until the early 19th century. Now, I don't mean it continued until today, because it didn't. And we'll explain that in a future video. But this form of certification that represented money stored or coins stored or wealth stored, that continued up until the early 19th century, until that eventually stopped. So in our next video, we will discuss some of the things that happened during this period of time, during the metal stage and the paper stage, and then we'll move on to what happened after that. Please like and subscribe to our video, subscribe and sign up to our mailing list if you want to find out, get the latest details about what we do and our latest blogs. And if you want to give us a chat, give us a call. Find our details on our website, Crypto Hash Review. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.